The fluorescent lights hummed their midnight song as Jenna Rodriguez pushed her cleaning cart down the empty corridor of Metropolitan General Hospital. At 28, her hands already showed the wear of 3 years working double shifts. But her dark eyes still held the fierce determination that had carried her through nursing school before life took an unexpected turn. "Mama, can I help organize the supplies tonight?" Tommy's voice echoed softly in the sterile hallway. Her 6-year-old son sat cross-legged beside her cart, homework spread across a clipboard, his sandy brown hair catching the harsh overhead. "Lighting, of course, sweetheart. But remember our rules," Jenna said, her voice warm despite her exhaustion. She had perfected the art of being both mother and provider during these lonely night hours. "Stay close to you. Don't touch anything dangerous. And if someone comes, sit quietly by the cart." Tommy recited perfectly, his green eyes bright with the kind of intelligence that made Jenna's chest swell with pride and worry in equal measure. As they worked together, Jenna cleaning patient rooms, while Tommy carefully sorted cleaning supplies. The familiar weight of their routine brought comfort to the uncertainty that had plagued her recent weeks. Someone had been asking questions about her at Tommy's school, strange phone calls, with no one on the other end. Feeling of being watched that made her skin crawl during her morning commute. "Mama," Tommy's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Why? Did that man at school ask Mrs. Peterson about whether I look like you?" Jenna's hands stilled on the disinfectant bottle. "What man, baby?" "The one with the badge. He said he was making sure all the kids were safe, but he asked weird questions about whether I have a daddy and where we live." Tommy's matter-of-fact tone belied the anxiety creeping up Jenna's spine. She knelt to his eye level, studying his delicate features that had always seemed oddly familiar yet foreign at the same time. "Tommy, if anyone asks you questions like that again, you tell them to talk to Mama first, okay?" "Okay, but Mama, why don't I look like you?" "Connor's mom says families always look alike." The question that haunted Jenna's sleepless nights had finally found its way to Tommy's innocent lips. She looked at his green eyes, so different from her brown ones, his light hair contrasting with her dark curls, the aristocratic bone structure that seemed to come from nowhere in her working class. Family tree. "Sometimes families are made in different ways, sweetheart. What matters is that we love each other and take care of each other," she said, pulling him into a hug that felt like both protection and apology. What Jenna couldn't tell Tommy was that she had found him as a newborn, abandoned in the hospital's emergency department 6 years ago. She had been working her first shift as a nursing student when someone left him in the waiting room with nothing but a note that read, "Please give him a better life than I can." The hospital's investigation had turned up nothing. No cameras caught the person who left him. No fingerprints. No leads. Jenna had intended to follow protocol, to let social services handle the abandoned infant. But when she held him during that first night, when he stopped crying only in her arms, something shifted in her heart. The paperwork mysteriously went missing. Security footage was accidentally deleted. Somehow, Jenna Rodriguez became the mother of a baby boy she named Tommy. "Mama, there's a man watching us," Tommy whispered. Pointing toward the end of the hallway, Jenna's blood turned cold as she spotted a tall figure in a security uniform standing near the elevators. He wasn't part of the regular night staff. Posture was too alert, too focused on them specifically. When their eyes met, he didn't look away like a normal person might. Instead, he studied her with the calculating gaze of someone gathering information. "Come on, baby. Let's go clean the pediatric wing," Jenna said, quickly gathering their supplies and steering Tommy in the opposite direction. But as they moved through the hospital's maze of corridors, Jenna noticed the man following at a distance. He maintained perfect surveillance spacing, never close enough to seem threatening, but never far enough to lose sight of them. Her nursing training had taught her to recognize behavioral patterns, and this man moved like law enforcement. In the pediatric wing's supply closet, Jenna pulled out her phone and called the hospital's main security desk. "This is Jenna Rodriguez from housekeeping. There's someone in a security uniform on the 7th floor who isn't on tonight's roster." "Ma'am, we don't have anyone scheduled for 7 tonight. Can you describe this person?" Jenna's hands shook as she provided details. Within minutes, 2 legitimate security guards arrived, but the mysterious man had vanished. The elevator showed No record of recent activity. Stairwell cameras revealed nothing. Maybe he was just lost, one guard suggested. But Jenna caught the meaningful look he exchanged with his partner. The rest of her shift passed intense alertness. Tommy sensed her anxiety and stayed closer than usual, his small hand occasionally reaching for hers when they moved between rooms. During their routine break in the hospital cafeteria, Jenna noticed an expensive black car parked across the street through the large windows. A woman sat in the driver's seat, her face partially hidden by designer sunglasses, despite the midnight hour. "Mama, that lady has been watching our building too," Tommy said quietly, following her gaze. "I saw her yesterday when we got home from school." Jenna's protective instincts exploded into high alert. "What do you mean, sweetheart? She was sitting in that same car outside our apartment?" When I waved at her through our window, she drove away really fast. The pieces of a puzzle Jenna hadn't realized she was solving began clicking into place. The questions at school, the mysterious security guard, the surveillance. Someone was investigating them, building a case, preparing for something that made her stomach twist with dread. That morning, as they walked to their beat-up Honda Civic in the hospital parking garage, Jenna spotted the man from the hallway leaning against a concrete pillar, no longer bothering to hide his observation. "Time." He approached them directly, "Ms. Rodriguez." His voice was professionally neutral, but his eyes held a mixture of determination and something that looked almost like sympathy. "I'm Detective Ryan Cross. I need to speak with you about Tommy." Jenna instinctively positioned herself between the detective and her son. "About what?" "He's 6 years old. What could he possibly have done? It's not about what he's done. It's about who he is." Detective Cross glanced around the parking garage, ensuring they were alone. "Ms. Rodriguez, we need to discuss Tommy's biological family, people who've been looking for him for 6 years." "I don't know what you're talking about," Jenna said, but her voice betrayed her fear. "The Pierce family has been searching for their missing grandson since he was taken from the hospital 6 years ago. They hired me to investigate what happened that night." Detective Cross pulled out a photograph that made Jenna's world tilt sideways. The picture showed a man in an expensive suit standing next to a woman in pearls. Between them stood a younger woman, who looked exactly like Tommy would if he were 25 and female. The same green eyes, the same bone structure, the same aristocratic features that had always seemed out of place in Jenna's working-class life. "This is Judge Hamilton Pierce and his wife." The woman in the middle was their daughter, Catherine. She died in a car accident 6 months after giving birth to a son she named Thomas Pierce. The baby disappeared from the hospital the night Catherine died. "We believe that baby is the boy you call Tommy." Jenna felt the ground shifting beneath her feet, the note that came with Tommy, the lack of investigation, the mysterious disappearance of paperwork. Hadn't been coincidence or luck. Someone had orchestrated Tommy's placement with her. Now the truth was surfacing like a bubble breaking the surface of still water. "Tommy isn't missing," Jenna said fiercely. "He's right where he belongs. Someone who loves him and takes care of him every single day is Rodriguez. I believe you've been an excellent mother to him. But his grandfather is a federal judge with significant resources. If he chooses to pursue legal action for custody of his grandson," Detective Cross left the sentence hanging, its implications clear. Tommy tugged on Jenna's hand. "Mama, who are they talking about? Who is Thomas Pierce?" The innocence in his voice broke Jenna's heart. How could she explain that his entire identity might be built on someone else's desperate decision 6 years ago? How could she tell him that people with money and power were preparing to tear apart the only family he had ever known? "It's okay. Baby, we're just having a grown-up conversation." Jenna knelt down and cupped his face in her hands. "But remember what I always tell you. No matter what happens, no matter what anyone says, you are my son, and I love you more than all the stars in the sky. I love you too, Mama. Are we in trouble?" Before Jenna could answer, the sound of expensive heels clicking across concrete echoed through the parking garage. The woman from the black car approached them, removing her sunglasses to reveal eyes that were identical to Tommy's. Her face was lined with years of grief, but when she looked at Tommy, hope flickered there like a candle being lit in a dark room. "Hello, Thomas," she said softly, her voice breaking on the name. "I'm Victoria Blackwood. I was your mother's best friend." I've been looking for you for a very long time." The moment stretched between them like a bridge over an impossible chasm. On one side stood Jenna, and the life she had built with Tommy through love, sacrifice, and determination. On the other side stood people with legitimate claims, legal rights, and the kind of resources that could reshape a 6-year-old boy's entire world. Tommy looked up at Jenna with complete trust, waiting for her to make sense of the chaos surrounding them. In that moment, Jenna realized that everything she thought she knew about their life was about to change forever. The truth was finally catching up to them, and she had no idea how to protect the child who had become her entire world from the storm that was about to break over their heads. The morning sun streamed through the parking garage's concrete openings, casting long shadows that seemed to point toward an uncertain future. Detective Cross watched the interaction with professional detachment. Victoria Blackwood studied Tommy with desperate hunger, and Jenna held her son's hand like a lifeline in an ocean of uncertainty. Whatever happened next would determine not just Tommy's future, but whether love and devotion could triumph over law and blood when the two forces collided in a battle for a little boy's soul. Victoria Blackwood's revelation hung in the parking garage, like smoke that refused to clear. Jenna felt Tommy's small hand tighten around hers as he processed the words that were reshaping his understanding of the world. "I don't understand," Tommy said quietly, his 6-year-old mind struggling with concepts too complex for his age. "Mama is right here. Why are you looking for me?" Victoria's composure cracked as she heard him call Jenna Mama with such natural affection. Tears pooled in her green eyes that mirrored his own so perfectly, it was like looking at prophecy fulfilled. "No. Thomas, your birth mother was my dearest friend. She died. You disappeared from the hospital before we could bring you home to your grandfather. We've been searching ever since." Victoria's voice was gentle, but carried the weight of 6 years of desperate hope. Detective Cross stepped closer, his professional demeanor softening as he witnessed the emotional collision unfolding before him. "Ms. Rodriguez, I need you to understand something. Judge Pierce isn't just wealthy and connected. He's grieving. His daughter Catherine was everything to him. When she died and then Thomas vanished, it nearly destroyed him." Jenna's protective instincts flared like a wildfire. "And what about Tommy's feelings? What about the fact that I'm the only mother he's ever known? You can't just sweep in here and tear apart his life because some judge wants to claim him." "Mama," Tommy tugged on her jacket, "are they saying I'm not really yours?" The question pierced Jenna's heart like a blade. She knelt down to his eye level, choosing her words carefully. "Baby, you know how sometimes people adopt children and love them just as much as if they gave birth to them?" Tommy nodded, his expression serious beyond his years. "Sometimes life brings people together in unexpected ways. What matters is that I chose you, and you chose me, and we've been a family ever since." Victoria watched this interaction with a mixture of admiration and heartbreak. "Ms. Rodriguez, may I ask how Thomas came to be with you? The hospital records from that night are mysteriously incomplete." Jenna hesitated, knowing that her answer could change everything. "Someone left him in the emergency department with a note asking for him to have a better life. I was a nursing student working my first night shift when I held him. When he stopped crying only in my arms." She paused, looking at Tommy with infinite tenderness. "I couldn't let him go into the system. I took a chance that love would be enough." Detective Cross pulled out a tablet and showed Jenna's security footage that made her blood run cold. The grainy video showed a young woman in scrubs carrying a baby through the hospital corridors at 2:17 a.m. on the night Tommy was found. "This is Dr. Patricia Wells," he explained. "She was Catherine Pierce's attending physician when Thomas was born. 3 days after Catherine died in the car accident, Dr. Wells was seen removing the baby from the neonatal unit. She disappeared that same night and hasn't been found since." Victoria stepped forward, her voice urgent. Patricia was Catherine's closest friend during her pregnancy. Catherine was unmarried, and her father was furious about the scandal. Patricia knew how much Judge Pierce loved Catherine, but she also knew he was pushing for the baby to be placed for adoption to protect the family's reputation. The pieces of a 6-year-old puzzle began forming a picture that made Jenna's head spin. You're saying this doctor took Tommy and deliberately left him where she knew someone would find him and care for him? Patricia sent me a letter the day she disappeared, Victoria revealed, pulling out an envelope that looked worn from years of handling. She said she couldn't let Thomas grow up knowing he was unwanted by his own family. She said she was going to ensure he found parents who would love him unconditionally. Tommy had been listening with the intense concentration. Children bring to adult conversations they sense will affect their lives. So the doctor lady knew my mama would love me? Victoria smiled through her tears. I think she saw something in your mama that told her you would be safe and loved. Detective Cross cleared his throat. The problem is that Patricia Wells had no legal authority to place Thomas for adoption. Technically, what happened 6 years ago constitutes kidnapping, even if the intentions were good. Jenna felt the world tilting beneath her feet. Are you saying I could go to prison? I'm saying the situation is legally complex. Judge Pierce has the resources to pursue criminal charges and custody simultaneously. But Detective Cross hesitated. Glancing around the parking garage to ensure they remained alone, I've been investigating this case for 8 months. I've watched you and Tommy. I've seen how you live, how you sacrifice, how much you love him. He pulled out his phone and showed them photos that made Jenna's heart stop. Pictures of her walking Tommy to school, images of them sharing dinner at their tiny kitchen table, photos of her reading bedtime stories in their modest apartment. You've been watching us for 8 months? Jenna's voice rose with indignation. Judge Pierce hired me to build a case for custody. He wanted documentation that Thomas wasn't being properly cared for, that he'd be better off with his biological family. Detective Cross put his phone away. His expression conflicted. What I found instead was a 6-year-old boy who's intelligent, happy, and deeply loved by a mother who works 3 jobs to give him everything she can. Victoria studied Jenna with new respect. 3 jobs? I clean the hospital at night, work data entry during the day, and help at a veterinary clinic on weekends, Jenna said quietly. Whatever it takes to make sure Tommy has what he needs. What about what you need? Victoria asked gently. I need him to be happy and safe. Everything else is just details. Tommy looked up at the adults surrounding him with wisdom that seemed impossibly mature for his age. Why can't I have 2 families? Why can't I love my mama and also meet my grandfather? The simplicity of his question illuminated the complexity of their situation. Victoria exchanged a meaningful look with Detective Cross before speaking. Your grandfather isn't just any person. He's Federal Judge Hamilton Pierce. Sits on the bench that handles custody cases like this one. He has connections throughout the legal system. Victoria paused, choosing her words carefully. When powerful. People want something. They often find ways to get it. Jenna felt panic rising in her chest. What exactly does that mean? Detective Cross answered with reluctant honesty. It means Judge Pierce could file for emergency custody claiming you're an unfit parent, your financial situation, the fact that you never formally adopted Tommy, the irregular circumstances of his placement with you. A sympathetic judge might rule that Thomas belongs with his biological family. But I'm not unfit, Jenna protested. Tommy is healthy, happy, loved. He's thriving in school. I know, Detective Cross said quietly. That's why I'm having second thoughts about my assignment. Victoria stepped closer to Jenna, her expression shifting from adversarial to conspiratorial. It's Rodriguez. May I ask you something personal? Jenna nodded warily. In 6 years, have you ever wondered about Thomas's biological family? Have you ever wished you could tell them he was safe and loved? The question hit closer to home than Jenna wanted to admit. Sometimes I wondered if someone was looking for him. There were people who loved him before I did. But I was scared that if I reached out, they'd take him away from me. And now we're here anyway, Victoria said gently. The universe has a way of bringing truth to light eventually. Tommy tugged on Victoria's expensive coat with the fearlessness of childhood. Are you really sad that you couldn't find me before now? Victoria knelt down to his eye level, fresh tears starting to flow. Oh, sweetheart, yes. I've been very sad. Your mama Catherine was my best friend, and when she died, I promised her I would make sure you were okay. When you disappeared, I felt like I'd failed her. But I'm okay, Tommy said matter-of-factly. My mama takes really good care of me. She reads me stories and helps with homework and makes funny voices when I'm scared of thunderstorms. Victoria looked at Jenna with something approaching wonder. You do all that while working 3 jobs? You do whatever it takes when you love someone? Jenna said simply. Detective cross-checked his watch and glanced around the parking garage nervously. We need to move this conversation somewhere private. Judge Pierce expects my report this afternoon, and if he doesn't get it, he'll send someone else to investigate. Victoria stood quickly. There's something else you need to know. Judge Pierce isn't just grieving his daughter and missing his grandson. He's dying. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Jenna instinctively pulled Tommy closer to her side. It's pancreatic cancer, Victoria continued. He has maybe 6 months. His desperation to find Thomas isn't just about legacy or legal rights. It's about a dying man who wants to know his grandson before it's too late. Tommy processed this information with the directness children bring to difficult truths. So my grandfather is sick like Mrs. Patterson's grandpa was? Yes, sweetheart, Victoria said gently. He wants to meet me before he goes to heaven? Very much. Tommy looked up at Jenna with those green eyes that held wisdom far beyond his 6 years. Mama, I think we should let him meet me. If he's sick and sad, maybe seeing me would make him feel better. And maybe seeing him would make me understand more about where I came from. The profound compassion in her son's voice broke Jenna's heart and filled her with pride simultaneously. Here was this little boy, faced with the possibility of losing the only life he'd ever known, thinking about how to comfort a dying stranger who shared his blood. Baby, it's not that simple, Jenna began. But Tommy interrupted with the clarity that sometimes emerges from innocence. Why not? You always tell me that love doesn't get smaller when you share it. It gets bigger. Maybe I can love you and also love my grandfather. Maybe there's enough love for everyone. Victoria and Detective Cross stood silent, witnessing a 6-year-old child demonstrate emotional intelligence that most adults never achieve. In that moment, surrounded by legal complexities and family secrets, Tommy had cut through to the heart of what mattered most. But even as Jenna felt her heart swelling with love for this remarkable child, she knew that love alone might not be enough to navigate the storm that was approaching. Judge Pierce had money, power, and legal rights on his side. All she had was 6 years of devotion and a little boy's trust that she would protect him, no matter what. The question was whether that would be enough. When their carefully built world collided with forces beyond their control, the emergency meeting took place in Victoria's downtown penthouse apartment, a space that seemed to exist in a different universe from Jenna and Tommy's modest 1-bedroom home. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, while expensive artwork and furniture spoke of wealth that could reshape lives with a single phone call. Tommy sat cross-legged on a Persian rug that probably cost more than Jenna's annual salary, carefully examining a crystal figurine Victoria had given him to hold. His wonder at the luxury surrounding them was evident, but he remained close to Jenna, occasionally reaching for her hand when the adult conversation grew too intense. Judge Pierce will be here in 20 minutes, Victoria announced, checking her platinum watch. Ryan convinced him to meet before making any legal moves, but his patience is running thin. Detective Cross paced near the windows, his conflicted expression revealing the weight of his moral dilemma. I need to be honest with everyone. The judge hired me to build a case against Ms. Rodriguez. He expected me to find evidence of neglect or incompetence that would support an emergency custody petition. Jenna's stomach clenched. And instead I found a mother who sacrifices everything for her son's well-being. A child who's academically gifted, emotionally stable, and deeply bonded with his caregiver. Detective Cross stopped pacing and faced them directly. I found a family that works, even if it wasn't created through conventional means. Victoria set down her coffee cup with deliberate care. The irony is that Catherine would have loved what you've created, Jenna. She was pregnant and alone, fighting with her father about keeping the baby or placing him for adoption. She wanted to be a mother, but she was terrified of raising a child without support. What happened to her? Jenna asked gently, sensing the grief that still surrounded Catherine's memory. Car accident when Thomas was 3 months old. She was Driving to meet me, actually. We were going to discuss how to convince her father to let her keep the baby. Victoria's voice broke slightly. If she hadn't died, none of this would have happened. She and Thomas would have been a family. Tommy looked up from the crystal figurine, his green eyes serious. So my first mama wanted to keep me, but she couldn't. Because she died. That's right, sweetheart. And your mama Catherine loved you very much, just like your mama Jenna loves you now. The sound of an elevator arriving in the private foyer made everyone tense. Victoria smoothed her dress and moved toward the entrance while Detective Cross positioned himself strategically between the door and where Jenna sat with Tommy. Judge Hamilton Pierce entered the apartment with the commanding presence of a man, accustomed to having his words carry the weight of law. At 73, cancer had begun to hollow his features, but his steel-gray eyes remained sharp and determined. He was followed by a woman in an expensive suit who radiated the confident authority of high-powered legal representation. "This is Amanda Foster, my attorney," Judge Pierce announced without preamble. His gaze swept the room until it landed on Tommy, and everything about his demeanor changed. The hardness melted from his face as he stared at the little boy who carried his daughter's eyes and bone structure. His hands trembled slightly as he took in every detail, as if memorizing a miracle. He'd thought he'd never witnessed, dear God, he whispered. He looks exactly like Catherine did at that age. Tommy studied the elderly man with the frank curiosity of childhood, noting the expensive clothes, the careful way he moved, the sadness that seemed to cling to him like shadow. "My grandfather?" Tommy asked directly. Judge Pierce's composure cracked completely. He sank into the nearest chair, his attorney moving quickly to support him. "Yes," he managed through tears that transformed his authoritative presence into that of a grieving father and grandfather. "Yes, I'm your grandfather. And you're the most beautiful boy I've ever seen." Jenna watched this interaction with her. Heartbreaking for everyone involved. This wasn't the cold, calculating power grab she'd feared. This was a dying man meeting his grandson for the first time, and the raw emotion in the room was undeniable. Tommy approached Judge Pierce with the fearless directness that had always amazed Jenna. "Victoria says you're sick like Mrs. Patterson's grandpa was. You going to die soon?" Tommy Jenna started to intervene, but Judge Pierce held up a gentle hand. "It's all right. Children deserve honest answers." He looked directly at Tommy. "Yes, I'm very sick. That's why meeting you is so important to me. I've been looking for you since before you could walk." "Why didn't you find me sooner?" Tommy asked. "Because someone wanted to make sure you ended up with a mama who would love you the way you deserved. And it seems like their plan worked perfectly." Judge Pierce looked at Jenna for the first time since entering the apartment.
Ow.
She steeled herself for criticism or condescension, but instead found something unexpected in his gaze: gratitude. "Ms. Rodriguez, Detective Cross has told me about your dedication to Thomas. It's about the sacrifices you've made and the love you've shown him." The judge's voice was formal, but not unkind. "I came here prepared to fight for custody of my grandson. What I found instead is a child who's clearly thriving under your care." Amanda Foster leaned forward, her legal instincts taking over. "Your Honor, we still have valid concerns about the irregular nature of Thomas's placement and Ms. Rodriguez's financial ability to provide for his future needs." "Amanda," Judge Pierce said quietly, "look at him. Really look at him." Everyone turned to observe Tommy, who had moved to stand beside Jenna's chair. His small hand rested on her shoulder in a gesture of unconscious protection, while his eyes moved between the adults with intelligent awareness of the gravity of their conversation. He's confident, articulate, and clearly secure in his attachment. To Ms. Rodriguez, Judge Pierce continued, "Whatever concerns we might have about legal procedures pale in comparison to the evidence of successful parenting I see before me." Detective Krause stepped forward. "Your Honor, there's something else you should know. I believe Dr. Patricia Wells orchestrated Thomas's placement deliberately. She didn't just abandon him randomly. She chose Ms. Rodriguez specifically." Victoria nodded in agreement. Patricia worked at the hospital for 2 years before Catherine's death. She would have observed the nursing students, seen their interactions with patients and families. When she decided to ensure Thomas found loving parents, she chose carefully. Jenna found her voice surprising herself with its steadiness. Judge Pierce, I understand your desire to have a relationship with Tommy, but I need you to understand something too. I didn't plan to become a mother that night 6 years ago. But when I held him, when he looked at me with those eyes, I knew. I would do anything to protect him and help him grow into the amazing person he's becoming. And you have, Judge Pierce said simply, the question now is how we move forward in a way that honors both his relationship with you and his connection to his biological family. Tommy looked between the adults with growing confidence, as if sensing that the storm threatening his world might be calming. Could I visit my grandfather sometimes and still live with Mama? It's like how Kevin visits his dad on weekends even though he lives with his mom? The simple wisdom of shared custody, expressed in 6-year-old terms, hung in the air like a solution no one had dared to articulate. Amanda Foster consulted her tablet quickly. Legally, that would require formal adoption proceedings for Ms. Rodriguez and a structured visitation agreement with the biological family. Given the irregular circumstances of Thomas's placement, it would be complex, but not impossible. Pierce leaned forward in his chair, studying Jenna intently. Ms. Rodriguez, would you be willing to formally adopt Thomas with my support and assistance? Would you allow me to be part of his life for whatever time I have left? The offer hung between them like a bridge over an impossible chasm. On one side lay the life Jenna had built through love and sacrifice, resources, and connection to Tommy's heritage. I have conditions, Jenna said finally, her voice stronger than she felt. Name 'em. Tommy's daily life doesn't change. Stays in his school, keeps his friends, continues living with me. Visits with you happen on his schedule, not yours. And if you ever try to use your influence to take him away from me, the deal is off. Judge Pierce nodded slowly. Those terms are more than fair. In return, I'd like to help with his education expenses, set up a trust fund for his future, and perhaps spend a few hours each week getting to know the grandson I thought I'd lost forever. Tommy looked up at Jenna with eyes full of hope and trust. Mama, I think this could work. I think maybe I can have you and also have a grandfather. Is that okay? Jenna pulled him into her arms, inhaling the familiar scent of his hair and feeling the solid warmth of his small body against hers. 6 years of fear and uncertainty were dissolving into something that looked remarkably like hope. Yes, baby. I think that's more than okay. I think that's beautiful. Victoria wiped tears from her eyes as she watched the unlikely family taking shape before her. Catherine would be so proud. She always believed love would find a way. Detective Cross closed his tablet and put away his surveillance notes. His assignment was complete, but not in the way anyone had expected. Instead of building a case to separate a family, he had helped broker an agreement that would expand one. As the afternoon sun slanted through Victoria's penthouse windows, casting warm light on the group of people who had found their way from conflict to cooperation, Tommy moved between Jenna and Judge Pierce with the easy confidence of a child, who finally understood he was loved by many people, rather than being pulled between them. The truth that had taken 6 years to surface had initially threatened to destroy their carefully constructed life. Instead, it had opened doors to a future none of them could have imagined. Tommy would grow up knowing both his history and his chosen family, understanding that love comes in many forms, and that families can be built through both biology and devotion. Sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones that form not through planning or convention, but through the mysterious alchemy of love, sacrifice, and the kind of grace that guides lost children to the hearts that need them most. In the gathering twilight of that transformative day, as Judge Pierce shared stories of Catherine's childhood and Jenna planned how to explain this miracle to Tommy's teachers, their son moved between his two worlds with the wisdom of someone who understood that love, when shared freely, multiplies rather than divides. The night shift had ended, but their new life was just beginning.